Always back because we say about a minute. Wonderful. Let us go ahead and reconvene. And next on our agenda is a commissioner stipend policy, and I'd like to thank Brian Scott for being here today with Uncommon Bridges, formerly known as BDS. And this has been a conversation that came up that has been present in the commission, kind of, I think, mostly starting with our strategic plan and looking at some of our overarching goals there. And so with that, I will hand it over to Mr. Scott.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all. Brian Scott with Uncommon Bridges. You'll remember me from the strategic plan and the facilitation about the city relationship. I want to share my screen briefly. I have a very short presentation by comparison to some of the places you've just been. I have 5 slides, counting this one. I'm here to make a few remarks about current trends and best practices in volunteer incentives for community participation in public agencies, especially boards and commissions. Volunteer incentives have become widely adopted in recent years as an acknowledgement that volunteer participation is not as simple as everyone doing their civic duty. It sort of sounds like everybody ought to just be able to do it, but it's not that simple for everyone. For many people, myself certainly included, life circumstances allow flexibility of schedule and family obligations, which make volunteer participation in civic activities possible and even enjoyable. McMinnville is a remarkable example of a community who has benefited tremendously from lots of civic volunteers who've done great work over generations in the community. But for many people in your community and every other community, the cost of childcare, transportation, time off from work, and other costs make volunteer civic participation a meaningful challenge, if not downright impossible. Similarly, public agencies often want to engage community members whose life experience give them unique perspective and expertise on the very issues the public agency is trying to address. Sadly, it's been way too common to pay public employees and their consultants handsomely to make these meetings happen and make the meetings happen without similarly compensating the community members for whom the expertise you're trying to reach is. And that's been common in communities all across the country and undoubtedly around the world. These issues happen across the board in various community settings, from large community meetings to focus groups or workshops to boards and commissions like the one you're sitting on here tonight. Just to offer a couple of definitions, I think there are volunteer incentives and compensation. All of these are mechanisms to acknowledge the effort and cost associated with a board and or commission service. An incentive would be a stipend to offset some of the costs and encourage participation, likely far below market rate compensation for the actual service provided. This might be to help offset costs like childcare or taking some time off from work or transportation or something else that might be a barrier to participation for some members. Then there's the consideration of compensation, which would be payments based on their fair market value or fair market rates to recompense for time, energy, expertise, and lived experience from this participation. A couple of examples of regional best practices and kind of where the best practices or state of the art is. Oregon's House Bill 2993 aims to reduce systemic barriers to participation in state boards and commissions through a $151 per diem compensation. That would be $151 per day for participation in a state board or commission. Far less than I would get paid to be there as a consultant, or the staff would get paid to be there in their professional capacity, but helping cover some cost. The Portland Utility Board, which was the closest thing exactly like the McMinnville Water and Light that we could find in a short amount of research, they provide $500 annually for voting member payment for participation on that board. In Washington State, the Revised Code of Washington designates monthly salaries for public utility commissioners. So those are some comparables to the work that you all do there. So those are my prepared remarks. In closing, I encourage this board to consider some modest incentives to partially offset the costs of participation for those volunteer participants whose participation may be much more burdensome or less for them in their life circumstances, and make it less so if they had such an incentive. Thank you. I'd be happy to participate in discussion as you would like.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank you additionally for being here. While you noted multiple times the cost of consultants to come into spaces and provide this type of advice, I just want to acknowledge publicly that Mr. Scott decided this was a continuation of the work he did with the strategic plan, and did not ask for any additional compensation to be here tonight to speak to us about volunteer incentives. And with that, Commissioner Tankersley.
So real quick question, just a clarification. You talked about the Public Utility Commissioners in Washington. That's the PUC, the body that determines rate cases for PGE and such. Is that who that is?
Oh, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. In Oregon, House Bill 2992 aims to reduce systemic barriers to participation in state board and commissions through a $150 per diem compensation. The Portland Utility Board provides a $500 annual voting member payment. In Washington State, the state law designates monthly salaries for the public utility commissioners. And I didn't do this research, so don't ask me to explain what the public utility commissioners are.
Mr. Dietz?
I can answer that question. That would be the PUDs in Washington.
The PUC?
The PUDs. So there's 22, 23 PUDs in Washington, and their commissioners get a monthly salary.
Okay. And
are they elected, John?
Yes, they're elected.
Okay.
Mr. Christensen?
Not to change the subject, but Brian, I'm really curious about the signage behind you.
I'm in the lobby of a hotel in Iowa City, Iowa at the moment. And while you've been debating your reserve policy, I've been walking around reading what the walls say, and I have no idea why it's here. It doesn't make any sense to me
Wednesday's
whatsoever.
quite a few months behind us, so interesting. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Christensen.
So I want to thank Brian for this important information as we continue to have a conversation. I think that I've spoken about this before. This is clearly about equity. This is about making sure that we're reducing barriers for participation on this commission. And we need to be thoughtful about the future of this commission and the amount of time and energy it takes to be a commissioner. And we want to make sure that we're removing any obstacle for someone to participate in the process to potentially be a commissioner. And so by having a policy like this in place, where we're clearly committed to that we're making sure that everyone has the opportunity to participate, it says, it speaks volumes about what we are trying to do here, which is represent our community. And if we're not, if we're not establishing policies that really show that, the work that we do here is meaningful, but we have to be able to say that it's for every community member has the opportunity to participate as a commissioner. And I think a policy like this would be an important step for the commission.
Thank you. Commissioner Tate, Chair Tate, anything to add? I do not. Commissioner Gormley, do you have anything to add?
You know, this is an interesting situation that we're in. Back to the charter and the separation of water and light from the city proper was all about trying to take politics and anything political away from the water and light board or the water and light company, and to really set it up as a business, even though it is quasi public. And so historically, the positions have been filled with people that had some skill set that they could bring to this $50 million, $60 million company and being an advisor in that. So it's an interesting situation, and I certainly don't want to speak against stipends. And I understand wanting to try and make it easy for people, childcare and all those barriers that might keep somebody from being able to volunteer. So, but it's an interesting situation compared to, you know, what the charter had set out, and they're trying to keep politics and who should serve on this board.
I'm not quite sure I understand how you see this, what you mean by politics, or how you see the commission setting up a volunteer.
You don't run for office here. You're appointed by the mayor, and your charge is to run this business.
Right, and how does that intersect with volunteer incentives for commissioners?
I don't know if that intersects, or I mean, that becomes a policy thing. And so I think I stated that I was not against, you know, stipends or whatever, that for people that basically, I'm not against trying to bring down barriers such as childcare and jobs and stuff like that. I just say it's an interesting situation to 2024 compared to, say, 1950.
I think Chair Tate had indicated, and then we'll go to Commissioner Tankersley.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like you're right. Things have changed a lot since the charter happened, and they've changed across all facets of all of our lives. But you know, I can clearly see in today's world that a business person, no matter how successful they are, could still have multiple, you know, barriers to spend time volunteering for an organization like this, and especially in today's you know, climate and with all of the potential personal challenges that somebody can have in their life and still want to play a social role like this. So I just think things look very different, and I think that we maybe don't represent, you know, how much things have changed since the charter happened 1889.
There's been new charters since then. There's been new charters since then.
Yeah,
So
two new charters.
anyway, yeah, I'm supportive of you know, making sure that that spending time here isn't a financial decision for somebody.
Commissioner Tankersley?
So Brian made the distinction between incentive and compensation, or reimbursement, versus paying somebody the fair market value of their services. I agree that we should not have barriers. On the other hand, I don't think paying somebody the fair market value of their services here is appropriate. And one of the reasons is and I've been on the audit committee for quite a while, and one of the first years, Mike Keys and I were talking to the auditor, and she told us that we're talking about how this functions, and the volunteer board and such. And she said, well, she had one utility she audited where it was in a kind of a rural, not very successful community financially. And they paid $70,000 a year for the elected commissioners. And first of all, Mike and I figured out how much water might owe us, but then putting on she said what happened, what the result was, is that people didn't worry so much about the utility as getting reelected because it was the best job in town. And so I think that the idea is not to give somebody a job to do this, but again, to take away a barrier, whether it's childcare. I'm not sure how you do that exactly. I think if we decided to move forward, we gotta figure out how that happens. And then finally, I think it would help Water and Light's image in the community to say, this is going forward and it doesn't apply to us. We're not voting for money for ourselves.
Yeah, I won't support that. I can tell you that. I mean, this is important to remove barriers. We have, I mean, if we're going to do a policy, I want to move it forward. I do want to move this forward. I agree with you that I don't think it's appropriate for the utility to look at fair market compensation right now. I definitely think moving forward with a volunteer incentive, whether it's a per diem or a per meeting, but one of the suggested methodologies. But I would think that as soon as the policy is brought forward and there was a date set for it to go into effect, it would go into effect for all commissioners.
I agree.
Commissioner Gormley?
Interesting enough, City of Salem many years ago had a policy of reimbursing counselors for cleaning clothing and that, which goes back to when people dressed very formally in that. And I don't know that they ever took it away. If it could still be in place and stuff. But I certainly understand exactly where you're coming from, Mayor and Jody, and appreciate the sensitivity towards that. So
Yeah, I think that
I've been to the Salem council meetings. I don't think that policy is inactive.
they don't dress up much anymore, do they?
I would suggest that we move towards a flat rate that would be for each member of the commission, whether or not they choose to take it or to leave it with the utility or to put it into customers, helping customers, but that flat rate would be available so that, you know, I'm not bringing in my dry cleaning bill after I go to DC because, you know, it might be viewed as inequitable. And you might think that I put some of my clothes that I wore when I wasn't at the Capitol there, but in fact, it would be $150 worth of dry cleaning that I only spent wearing at the Capitol. So I think doing to kind of address those concerns, not going with market rate compensation, which maybe addresses kind of that concern that somehow turns the position into a politicized position, but instead is addressing the fact that there are very real out-of-pocket costs, as was mentioned earlier, childcare. We know that comes up for committee members, regardless of gender. We know that comes up for committee members on various committees and commissions throughout the city. This one happens to be so unique in that we can set our own policy and that we have, you know, this few number of volunteers as opposed to the over 1,000 volunteers at the city. I say that because Commissioner Tankersley, I remember in a prior conversation you brought up that you didn't want to create friction with the city by setting some standard that the city maybe wouldn't be able to keep up with. And I'm not, and so I want you to know that I heard that concern and have thought about it. And I think that because we are so unique over here, including the fact that our financials are managed separately, that is not really a risk factor in this overall scenario.
So, Mayor, what would your suggestion be the numbers and you'd like to see?
My recommendation with the staff would be that staff bring back a set of numbers that are based on what we know from industry standard. And some of that research is already done, and you have additional suggestions here today, and then we could evaluate those numbers as a commission and make a recommendation based on what we see before us, as opposed to just a couple examples that are given.
So I guess to get some direction, because we don't want to make it so broad that we're spending a lot of time. So can we narrow down to, what I'm hearing is you would like a per meeting incentive maybe,
I mean, I think that
or per diem maybe?
I think that for me, and I'm open to any variations of this, but either a per meeting or a per diem for travel or a monthly stipend, any of those scenarios, I think are acceptable. I think a policy that comes forward should give commissioners the option of not taking it.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think that there's, not taking it, I think if it's not too complicated to also say that they could put it into customers helping customers, I think that would be a great thing to include in that.
Yeah.
So Trina, do we have, oh, go ahead.
So Sam, could you or someone figure out the tax implication of,
Well,
it's
income.
no,
Isn't it?
let me finish.
Oh, okay.
Of a commissioner not taking the money.
Yes.
There's, there's the tax thing about if you could have gotten it but chose not to, then you pay the tax on anyway. And then if somebody doesn't itemize, they'll pay tax on money they don't get. So will you check and make sure that that wouldn't be a problem, please? If it is, we need to know about it.
Okay, and it would probably, I mean, for staff's sake, it would be, I mean, there are tax implications, there's wage and hour implications. If, if the pay is more than nominal, over $500, one of the reasons that one entity pays $500 is that's sort of the threshold that state
That per
keeps
year or
per year.
Is it going to be $600 for the state of Oregon, as long, if it was less than 600 per year?
I don't know, but I know $500.
600 means you get a 1099, 599 you don't.
And also, would commissioners be employees for PERS and comp?
Well, that's why I raised wage and hour, because at some point, it's more than nominal. And you receive compensation, and it will kick to wage and hour issues, and then it'll have to be at least minimum wage, I think. And so there's a fuzzy area there, but it would be really helpful for staff, I think, for our staff to know, and trying to bring back something, whether your intention is, I mean, is it going to be more than a $500 stipend? Is going to be, I mean, if you're getting $150 per diem, there's an expectation of service, of work. I mean, there are implications.
This is a lot. It seems like fairly complicated. I mean, I sat on a board for several years that I got paid more close to my actual salary, and I got a 1099 from them at the end of the year, but I wasn't an employee, and it was a very clean, not complicated process. So I don't know if there's something more specifically set up if you're sitting on a commission or a board that has a different. I guess just look into it, because I have been in this place and it wasn't all of that.
And Sam, would a reimbursement for certain expenses like childcare or something like that, if we listed those, would those reimbursements also be?
I think reimbursements are different. We
Yes.
reimburse commissioners now for expenses.
Yeah.
Well, not all expenses. I mean, my dog care was $600 last time I traveled for the utility, and I know I can't submit that receipt. I can't submit dry cleaning receipts. So, I mean, those are very real expenses.
But I'm just saying that there's implications of if you're being paid, you're expected to be here at certain times for that compensation. You go down, there's a continuum, you travel down, and at some point you become employees.
So
Okay,
let's look at it this way.
So I mean, I'm
So-
just,
What
Just saying.
we're looking for is a place to start.
Okay.
So we're not, I don't think what we're expecting is a employee scenario. What we're looking for, at least in my perspective, is that there's an incentive or a stipend for someone who has a barrier to participating on the commission. And that whatever that looks like, it doesn't need to, I don't think we're looking for full salary, hourly wage. I think what we're looking for is something where someone could participate in a meeting and cover their childcare. Someone who doesn't have a car can hire transportation to come to the meeting. Someone who can't take a day off from work to go on a tour of that there's a way that they can cover whatever needs to be to participate at this. I don't think what we're looking for is a complicated system, but rather a place to start.
So we need to look at things that maybe don't trigger a tax consequence. Would be an option.
I mean, I think that trying to get this commission to determine what the stipend policy is when there's lots of examples out there is kind of putting us a little bit on the spot. Honestly, it feels right now like there is a barrier to removing this barrier when what we're really talking about doing is modernizing the system. And it's time for the system to be modernized.
I think what we're trying to figure out as staff is what we're going to bring back. That's the challenge.
So I wonder if Brian, who's listening intently, is there a way that we can sort of bring this into focus so that staff can kind of get us a place to start, something for us to react to? Would you give a framework for that direction?
Certainly that's possible. I don't have enough information in my head to just tell you right now, but it would seem to me that the staff or consultant could spend a few hours calling a few other agencies and give you some comparables, because everybody else has got the same issues with trying to stay out of tax consequences. And I can think of dozens of examples where they're already doing this. So that doesn't seem like a hard task to me.
Yeah,
We've already done some of that.
research is already
Yeah.
done. We have produced a document and it shows a range on there, and they're all comparable utilities and regional utilities, I believe, as well. So, I mean, I think working off of that, as those are like organizations in a like region, and none of those, if I remember correctly, none of them were exceptional. They were more like this, where it was $50 per diem or
Yeah,
something. It was a much smaller range. It didn't even tickle the feet of market rate.
Yeah, what I'm thinking is we would come back with maybe, here's an option, here's the pros and here's the cons.
Yeah,
That's
great.
good.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
That's a good idea.
And John, I think it would be good for the staff. There's also a policy for state boards and commissions.
We can look at that, yeah.
They have just have that in place
Yeah.
too.
Okay.
I think the flavor of the day is, we don't want it to be, at least
Complicated.
I don't want it to be complicated. And I don't want it to be a barrier for someone to say, oh, you have a stipend, but it's gonna cause me X, Y, and Z
Right.
in my taxes.
Yeah,
Right?
it's gonna
Let's-
make it work for
let's-
them.
Right, let's be thoughtful about creating a policy that's an entry level into this kind of.
And we want to make it simple so it's easy to administer.
Easy to administer, and then,
Yeah.
and we can review it after a year
Right, see if
and
it
see,
works.
yeah, how it's
Changes.
working, what challenges came up, if any.
Right. It's, yeah.
So to keep it simple, maybe just to pay the commissioners for their commission meeting, or
Well, that's the.
is there an expectation for all the other meetings we have, from your evaluation to the budget issues and, things like that? Or 7:30 meetings in the morning,
I know,
extra
like,
meeting.
I've seen some where they have, and so it's so much per meeting. But then they also put a cap on it because you don't want people just going to meetings just to go to meetings.
Yeah.
And that's,
And you have to be
Well-
present.
And you have
There's
to be
many
present,
that are,
right.
that state that.
right, and there's those kind of options, and I think the idea would be that, okay, here's an idea, and here's what staff's
Yeah.
identified as a pro. Here's the benefit, and here's what would happen, if, there's a tax consequence, no, there's not.
Yeah.
There's this, and so try to come up with those kind of things, because
Yeah, and
there's a lot of options that we could do.
there are, and if it's causing some organizational discomfort because it's new, then I think doing a more conservative approach with guardrails on it and then able to bring it back for review is a
Yeah.
pertinent way of going about it.
So Mayor, when you first brought this to us, did you have a number you thought might be a fair number?
No, it was just acknowledging that the lack of volunteer incentive is limiting, and it is, one does not need to have one can have expertise to give to this board without being in a financial position that would allow them to participate. And
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, great. That's enough direction to move
I
forward?
think so.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
we'll, look at, we'll come back to something if the commission wants, okay, no, we want to look at this.
I think
That's
this is
fine.
gonna take a couple meetings.
Yeah, I think it's not
Yeah.
it's not a, we want to have some dialogue.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Mr. Scott, thank you just again so much for your time today, for volunteering your time today to come and speak to the commission. We greatly appreciate it.
Brian, thank you for being here tonight.
You're welcome. Nice to see everybody.
Thanks.
Nice to
Bye-bye.
see you. Thank you. Next, we will welcome up Jacobs. We will get to our update on our water master plan addendum. That's
We don't want you to be bored.
So Craig, did you open any of those bottles of wine that you've been passing around?
No. Apparently
Really?
nobody has a corker in here. There's no corkers.
Tom Tankersley has a
Oh,
Boy
hey,
Scout
hold on,
knife.
hold
It's
on.
got everything on it.
You just hit it against the.
I've heard about
Yeah,
that technique.
yeah.
I've never been that desperate. My cars are outfitted
Oh,
with corkers.
Especially the new one.
Yeah, exactly.
They're on your tire.
so I think James Burke is gonna tee us up for this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have.
Craig, could you tell us how many years you have helped Water and Light?
I think I started with you in 2006.
Okay,
18.
very good.
Yeah, and
you
just-
get a vote now.
Well, I just wanted to make the comment that, we're talking about consultants, what they get paid and sitting here. I'm not charging you for my time tonight. Jacobs actually recognizes you're an important client of ours, and they give me an overhead number to spend to come and be with you. So that,
Thank you.
yeah,
And thank them too, please.
yes.
All right, so McMinnville Water and Light, Water Master Plan Addendum, we have Jacobs engineering with us tonight. Shad Roundy, he's been the lead on this addendum. He's worked on the 2011 Water Master Plan as well. He's put a lot of good work into this. It started back in 2022. Craig Massey, you all know Craig, I think. He's worked on a number of projects for McMinnville Water and Light as well. As a project manager, as an engineer, he worked on the water treatment plant upgrades. Did the zone 2 improvements for design, and most recently did the raw water line as well.
Yeah, which I was just at today, by the way. And if you want to see it, you could better hurry. Because they are rolling. They are,
Good.
yeah, they're at one end and they're just about to go into the plant.
So for the presentation, we have a lot of information, some charts and so forth. So as we go through the charts, if you have questions, ask them and we'll get through it here.
Thank you.
Yes, think, let me just test this out.
Touch the top of one time.
Okay. Yes, we've got, I think, 6 or 7 slides to cover the objectives of why we have an addendum to the Water Master Plan. And then some of the specifics that went into this document, and then how they feed into your capital improvement plan for the water system. We'll also be touching on the steps for.
We're getting some feedback. Is the speaker on the television?
Yeah, let me try one more time.
That sounds good.
We'll also cover the steps for adoption. So this presentation is informational, and there are some steps that we have to go through with both the state as well as with the city and their comp plan, their comprehensive plan. So this is kind of the first step in that adoption process. And we will be coming back to this commission in the future for formal adoption.
Okay, I'll add one thing, in regards to that, for tonight, we are looking for the direction to send this off to Oregon Health Authority for review. So as we get through this, our goal is to send this over to Oregon Health Authority for review and approval, and then as you said, bring it back for adoption.
That's right. There's really these two steps. One is the regulatory, which is Oregon Health, and then the other is the land use, which takes a little bit more time with public hearings with the city around that comprehensive plan change with this plan. So why is there an addendum? So the master plan was developed, updated in 2011. And that has been 12, 13 years. And there are still elements of that plan that are being implemented over time. What has happened since then is the city has formally gone through a process to expand the urban growth boundary. It had been held up by various political issues as well as other things. Now that it's been formalized, the study area for the plan needs to be updated to accommodate the new growth areas so that when development occurs within the capital improvement plan, there are projects to sustain that development. The other thing, every time we make a change to a water system plan, we go back to the information that's available for population projections. The 2011 plan had more conservative projections, and this one has been refined to be consistent with state resources that do the projections for each city and county. So this just gives you an example of the change in that population projection. You look at 2011, there was a pretty aggressive trend of compounding growth occurring with time. The current projection, which comes from the Portland State University Population Research Center, is much more linear, which means the actual growth rate decreases with time so that you sustain that linear trend without it compounding. All of the city's plans, including the water and light, are utilizing this same horizon of 2041. So transportation, wastewater, water. They have negotiated with the state, the city planning department has, for this target date of 2041. So it's approximately 20 years out or just under that. Whenever we do these plans, we do look beyond to whenever the population projection goes. So Portland State, as issued by the state, has done that projection out 50 years.
And that's what we're required to use, right? The city is required to use the PSU population number.
That's right, because of discrepancies that come up like this, where in the recent decade, that is now required. Yep. I should note that the trends from Portland State, they look at birth rates, death rates, migration to the city of just anybody, those growth rates that are naturally happening. Now, whether or not that's going to shift over time, this one reason we plan out even beyond that 20-year horizon is historically things have been held up because of the limited available area for development, right? So any historical trend that PSU has accounted for or was impacted by that restriction in available lands for housing needs and employment needs. So we go beyond 2041, but that just means that if growth happens, we've got to plan beyond that, even if over time this trend shifts a little bit. We have to translate population and employment into water demand. So we look at, and that's based on per capita or per person water usage, which we can measure with consumption and production records. So we look at an average day demand and a maximum day demand. Average is across the entire year. Max day is for that maximum day in the year. And we also look at peak hour. Yes.
Real quick question. Is there any adjustment because of potential climate change, higher water use? Is that in there?
Yeah, so what we actually are seeing with water demands is they're trending lower. Conservation measures and fixtures in homes have actually driven water usage downward over time.
I think that's happened recently, but
Yep.
will that continue? You're saying that will continue for 20 more years?
No, so there are a couple of factors with climate. The first one is the growth rate could shift, right? Because technically you could get people coming, from Colorado to Oregon,
Climate refugees.
right? You could see this growth trend, so it might happen more quickly, right? The other thing that can happen, of course, is if as summers are warmer, people may want to irrigate more, and that's where McMinnville Water and Light has this conservation plan, which I think the staff can comment on, but trying to sort of offset what could happen with increased irrigation are conservation measures.
So you're assuming that it won't really impact?
At this point, there are climate models that look at temperature increases. They go out about 50 years.
Okay.
But at this point, we have not assumed, what we've assumed is the current rate without any reduction in that over time.
Okay.
Yep. This is a picture of the storage that's available with the reservoirs currently in the system. We have a number of criteria that we look at, including sustaining 20% of our maximum day demand, having some emergency storage, which is a full day of maximum day demand, and then the largest fire requirement in the city, which is 4,500 gallons per minute for 4 hours. We would reduce that by operational storage. So if it can't be used because it's at the bottom of the tank, right, we subtract that off. When we look at the available volume compared to the required over time with that growth, you can see the deficiency in storage volume doesn't occur until beyond 2060. Now, that's not the only reason to look at new storage. Seismic resiliency, as well as aging reservoirs. Some of these were constructed in the 1910s and 20s. And so replacement of those or new ones in alternate sites are critical, as that infrastructure may have a limited life cycle of 50 to 60 years, where these are approaching well beyond that.
Question.
Yep.
So since we're a gravity system.
Yep.
Do you look at storage also as in our transmission main as well? Because that would be essentially a storage as well.
That I'd have to go back and look and see if we've incorporated that into the volume.
Because that volume, 22, I know that's the service reservoirs.
Okay.
It's storage.
Yeah, and so the question I would have is, we've got 10 miles of
Right.
transmission main.
And a 500,000 gallon clear well.
And a 500,000 gallon clear well, so there's additional storage there as well.
Right.
Yeah, and if you were, let's say you were deficient, we
Right,
would be
and
looking
then
at
you'd be
every
looking-
detail.
Yeah, we
Right, so
take credit for every little
that's
gallon you
gonna
could take.
that's gonna push it out another whatever number of years in terms of what you've got available. We can go back and pretty quickly do that calculation. This is the most complicated graph, I promise. This does look at those red lines are treatment capacity and finished water transmission capacity. These are in flow rate. So you can see that lowest line. I'm gonna use the point. There we go. This lowest line here is the capacity of that finished water transmission pipeline system. There's enough capacity out to just before 2050, or actually beyond
2040.
yeah, sorry, relative to maximum day, it's actually just beyond 2040, right? When we look at the treatment plant capacity, we have plenty of capacity moving out, and it could be expanded even further to 30 MGD. So in terms of treatment capacity, you're in really good shape. Transmission capacity, you are okay just through near the end of the planning period. What that doesn't account for, again, is the aging pipelines and the resiliency that you're trying to implement. So over the next 5+ years, you've got these projects to build up that capacity for even longer, but also develop these pipelines that can withstand more of that resiliency and replace
Just a
aging.
couple comments.
Yep.
So the water treatment plant current capacity of 22 million gallons per day was what you achieved in the expansion that you completed in 2010. Your reliable watershed yield, what the watershed can deliver to the plant, is 30 million gallons. And so the footprint of the plant is designed for that build out capacity. And it's way up in the hills. That finished water transmission line, when those pipelines are upgraded, will allow full gravity flow to potentially even a Fox Ridge reservoir that could be up the hill from the current location, and continue with an all gravity fed system in McMinnville
Into that upper zone.
Into the upper zone. Yeah, you are in. I work with a lot of cities around the valley, and you are in a marvelous position in terms of water supply, treatment capacity, and the fact that somebody was smart enough to put it up in the hills where it all gravity flows. And other than seismic risk, gravity is pretty reliable.
That's when Ed started.
Ed, was this your idea, Ed?
The engineers back then.
Now we start to look at the distribution system. So I know there's a lot of information on this graph. The important information, or on this graphic, the important information is that we are trying to sustain a minimum of 40 PSI, or pounds per square inch, of pressure throughout the system. And typically you're seeing much greater than 40 PSI. Right, that's these orange kind of in this main zone are upwards of 80 PSI. And then as you get to the higher elevations, they're well above 40 PSI as well. You can also see here that all these red pipes are the backbone for the growth areas that were added to the urban growth boundary. And a major portion of the projects are to not only continue to replace aging infrastructure, but to build this backbone so that development can happen. And the timing of that will be somewhat driven by those development trends, as well as the other infrastructure in the city. This is just another picture. It looks almost the same, but this is under a peak hour demand. So the highest hour of the day, we're trying to keep under those rare circumstances pressure above 30 PSI, and you typically see well above 40 PSI, even in the peak hour. As was discussed earlier with the questions around the fire hydrants, right? The fire flow with the maximum day demand really controls the sizing of the pipelines and the infrastructure. So we need to maintain for any single fire, at least 20 PSI in the system, and typically you see greater than 40 PSI. And then you can see that we actually look at variable flow rates and durations for those fire flow requirements. What does the capital plan look like? Again, you'll see that most of these projects occur in that backbone infrastructure, separate from the pipelines you see in the map. The key projects are the Zone 2 improvements, the booster station that's going in. Currently, there's a 3rd Street improvement project that is starting up. The finished water transmission phases 3 and 4, a future reservoir over in the Fox Ridge area, the treatment plant, land purchase, and there are some costs for a future expansion for that treatment plant. Around 1950 is when those are scheduled out. Or sorry, not 1950, 2050.
2050.
It's all the same. This summarizes the total capital project work over this 50+ year period. You can see that's close to $220 million. We'll look at that distributed over time. This just categorizes the different types of projects. You can see that the transmission pipeline makes up the greatest chunk of those capital dollars. Storage, that Fox Ridge area, some for treatment, and then we do see a fair amount of combined work in the transmission system as well. This right here, again, is really driven by the development that is going to occur, and the timing may shift just depending on actual development trends. We have taken a draft cut at distributing those dollars based on your current capital program, and then trying to maintain approximately a $6 million investment over time. Now, these could shift a little bit one direction or the other. And again, you can see here that a portion of each of these is kind of that development driven, which is assumed equal, but may come and go depending on actual trends. And then the rest are those other projects, like the investment you're making in the transmission, eventually the water treatment, et cetera, kind of balancing out that $6 million over time. This is the steps for plan adoption. Today, we're providing this informational session. If we get your approval to move forward, the next step is to submit this to the regulatory agency, Oregon Health Authority. They will review it for specifically the water requirements established by them for the state and the EPA. And then from there, we will go into a land use process, which is to take the plan, summarize the findings, coordinating that with the city, and adding some additional information to the overall city comprehensive plan. From there, it goes to the DLCD, which is the State Land Commission. They review it over a 35-day period. We bring it back to you, this commission, for formal adoption. And then we have a series of public meetings for adoption of the changes to the city comprehensive plan.
This council also then has to go then and accept those changes for updates to the comprehensive plan, correct?
But the comprehensive plan specifically, yeah.
And what about if this commission approves this plan and then because it is a component of the city's comprehensive plan, if council wanted changes within whatever the commission had done, is that allowable, not allowable? Just, can you tell me how that would play out?
Yeah, so the city council's focus and the state land commission's focus is, do you have a plan to meet the development demand, right? So they're not going to really comment on treatment, probably not on the transmission side of things, water rights. What they want to know specifically is, how are you going to serve these growth areas? So they may have questions, particularly on that boundary where we start to get to the higher elevations. And the city planning department's already asked some of those questions. So if it's minor, we're going to address it in the documentation that goes with the comprehensive plan. If it's more significant, we'd obviously have a discussion and then potentially would have to come back here. But I don't see that there's
Not
any
something that's
major.
happened in your history, really, of a council pushing back on a.
Yes, but with different jurisdictional responsibilities, right? Where they are the utility, specifically.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So, we anticipate this ordinance for the comp plan amendment to be adopted, first quarter of next year. It just takes a while to go through these various meetings. And I'm happy to respond to any questions, or James and Craig can answer as well.
Thank you so much. Could we maybe take the screen share down so we can see Commissioner Gormley as well, or minimize it? And I'll open it up to questions and comments from the commission.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Tankersley.
Okay, so real quickly. The plan, as I recall, went to 41, right?
That's right.
We have some things that we may have to get done before that, like vesting water rights. And I didn't see them in there because we get, like, John told me that we may be able to extend the 30-year deadline, but we can't be sure. So we need, I think we need.
Certificating,
Perfecting.
but on McGuire and Haskins, or?
There's McGuire and Haskins that's mentioned here, but the ones I was thinking about mostly are the ones we bought on the Willamette.
Okay. Yeah.
And so-
regional water.
The ones on McGuire, we could probably use the flow that we, when we did the testing tracer study. Yeah, you just have to demonstrate that you ran it for a period of time and got beneficial use.
Right, but this says
Yeah,
they're not done yet. And I think it's because we don't have the capacity to treat.
Your water rights
extent of
exceed your ability to
the
beneficially
raise.
use it, yeah.
So I would really appreciate if you could look at that and let us know whether this plan really works for doing that. And then also so it's McGuire, and it's also the ones down on the Willamette. And also, even if we don't have to build something to do it, I would like the plan to have some kind of road sign and thing to tell us people in 35 or whatever the date is that they need to start working on it, so they don't just look at the plan and say, well, because John won't be here to keep it.
Yeah, there's kind of some staging things. So the 2011, we're providing an addendum to the 2011 plan. So I need to go back and look and see, the 2011 plan went through 2031, and there's a scheduled full update probably around that time. So if there's a gap for your water rights, you're right, there's probably a need to at least address what you're gonna do with that gap.
Yeah, we have a lot of water rights too, so we have to be looking at, they all come at different times.
But
Right.
also, what we have to do to perfect it. I mean,
Those
I
are
mean, do we have to put more filters in? Do we have to do that? So that would change your timeline on what has to be done, I would think, right?
I think, yes. So I think the main thing will be for us to look and see if any of those expire before the 2031, and then,
Okay, I can tell you the answer to that is no, but
okay,
the question is, even if they don't expire, even if they don't expire before 2041.
Right.
Do they expire soon enough after it that you're gonna have to start at capital improvements? So
yes, if that gap is, so let's say that they expire in this, hypothetical 2045, right? The next plan that would go from 2031 to 2051 would need to start, just before 2030. So if there's that much buffer, you could wait till then. If there's not, then you want to maybe look at it sooner than that to have a plan that gets.
So we have incorporated certain projects into a capital improvement plan. The Adam Sussman come back, they worked on the water management conservation plan, and this was adopted a few, 6 months ago or so. Which addresses a lot of those issues in regards to the water rights in there. And they are out pretty far. Those capital projects are addressed in our capital facility plan.
Yeah, when you have several of the transmission pipelines in place, you could probably perfect up to 22 MGD at the water plant. Yeah, yeah,
But I do
even if
like
it's just for
the
happening.
idea of adding some language like a roadmap in there in regards to,
Yeah.
if someone's reading through there, there's some language to when to start. And as simple as there's a water rights section where we can add some language to, I think.
that's right. This was on Exhibit C was where I found this. I'm trying to.
Yeah, and that's the holdover from the 2011 plan.
Is it?
It's very small text. Isn't it?
Updated version.
Right,
Trina sent it out. I don't look for it.
you're looking at that table there.
That table, that's the table.
Oh, this includes, this is
So
the
the
capital
profession
project
are over
list.
Here the.
Turn
Yeah.
your electric blanket all the way up.
So there's 42, you see 42 for
You
McGuire.
turn it down or up?
So if
33
there's
for the-
changes. Oh,
But that's
there's-
the, yeah,
That's Willamette, yeah.
and I think that's the big one.
Mhm.
So we don't really care about that because it's not really new to us, but.
Yeah,
these two-
33 CFSs.
Yeah, but that one. Most of the summer you can't take it.
It's pretty-
Oh, yeah.
That's the-
Ed and I had this
Yeah.
conversation 6 months ago when I was, no, a year ago, when I was looking at a regional
But the
study.
other one we have to perfect by 46, and I don't think we could, in the 5 years, unless we can perfect it by, taking a truck full of water and dumping on somebody's farm. Which I
We were
think can't.
on the intake structure for the Yamhill Regional Water, we were working with Brillo on some of that work there for that project coming up, and that is in our capital budget.
It is, okay.
It is.
So I just wanted to be sure that it's in here and that we do as
I think-
James is saying, put the warning in there so that when people look at it, they don't say, well, we followed the plan.
I'm working off a memory, but I think the environmental piece of it comes out in 5 years. That's when you start working on the environmental section of it.
Okay.
But yeah, but we can add some language in there in regards to a roadmap or something for water rights.
Yeah, yep. We can probably replicate this table in terms of priority and then, yep.
And we're comfortable that the infrastructure we're planning for by 2041 is enough to do these perfections, right?
So what would happen is you will have a plan update in 2030 timeframe. So
Yeah, but
So those perfections depend on the demand as well.
so
So
using it, we gotta use
right,
it.
so you have to use it. But we're also that's due to the Department of Water Resources. So working with them as well in regards to the water rights. Every 5 years, we have to go back and visit that water management conservation plan, and that's where they start talking about the water rights. And that's our point of contact over there.
And they're trying to take them away from us.
Well, they're just trying to make sure we use them and when we sit down, we talk about what the future goals are, who's needing water regionally, what are our needs,
Okay.
redundancy wise.
Okay. so
And
that's
at least
what-
showing that we have a plan for them.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
That's good.
Commissioner Gormley?
Two questions. Walker Flats is totally off the table.
Yeah, we gave that one back.
Yep.
Brad?
Yep.
Okay, so no going back and recapture or anything like that.
No, that's behind us.
Okay.
Well, part of it should probably be clear.
Except for the one we vested already. or
The,
perfected
well,
already, right?
the run of the river right,
Yeah.
we still have, it was the storage right we gave. We
Yeah,
knew we
that's
could,
true.
we couldn't
That's right.
perfect a storage right because we could never build a reservoir.
Okay, second question. I mean, this is great. Back to home and the West Hills and getting lots available for, housing and trying to fill our housing needs. What's ever become of the loan that grant received to, get the infrastructure put together?
You're talking about zone two?
Yes.
Couldn't hear the question
He was
entirely.
asking about the grants.
Well, it's not a grant,
What-
but
what- I mean,
what's the question? I'm sorry, I couldn't understand you.
or with zone two work to try and get figure out how can we get more lots for people to be able to build homes.
So Ed, you're cutting out a little bit. I wonder if you could turn off your video?
I've lost
Oh,
it
We're
again.
Yeah, so we can't fully hear you, but perhaps you could turn off your video and then your audio will come through more clearly.
Okay.
All right, you want to try?
So the question goes back to, this is great big picture stuff, but what about trying to get more lots available in the West Hill? We were able to get a grant, I thought, to try to some of the structure. What's ever come of that?
He's talking.
Well, I think that's already included in the water master plan previously, because that development was approved in 2007 and this water master plan's from 2011. So I don't think that would be affected at
We've
this time.
updated it with
It's
actual
updated,
costs,
yeah.
but yeah.
But it's considered.
Okay, I'm just curious, we got this grant, is construction ever going to take place?
That's gonna be, that's the developer moving forward with the development.
So we have a design. And it sounds like they're gonna be moving forward with construction development.
Okay, that'd be
We have,
great.
we have
Just send
Jacobs,
you an
we have
updated
Jacobs on
cost
contract for
estimate.
construction, engineering support, so.
Okay, great. Thank you.
for the purposes of this
For
discussion,
purposes of this.
we're just, you're not seeking an approval or.
We aren't, we're just looking for some,
Direction.
we will, we're,
We'd like a motion to give direct
Oh.
staff to send this water master plan to the Oregon Health Authority. That's what we're looking.
Yes.
Yeah,
With-
I would still move with the addition that James talked about making.
The schedule,
The roadmap.
Water rates.
Yes,
Okay.
like,
Okay.
So it's a motion, not direct staff. Where it says direct staff, it's a motion.
It's a motion.
Okay, I have a motion to direct staff to forward the updated water master plan to the Oregon Health Authority for approval. Do I have a motion from Commissioner Tankersley? May I have a second?
I'll second.
A second from Commissioner Christensen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Unopposed, nay. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
to see.
we do have,
Thank you.
also, if people ask, we do have everything up on the website. So the 2011 and the addendum is up there currently.
Hey, Craig, is Mark Laswell a name you remember?
Thank you.
Oh, yes, I think I'm gonna see him in early October. In fact, we're planning a little CH2M Hill alumni event in Corvallis.
Has he retired or is he somewhere in Colorado?
Yeah. He's retired, living in Montana and acting as a fishing guide.
Okay, good for him. Well, he helped put the
Yeah,
80 the 80 sewer plant together for us, so that was great.
Oh,
Thank you.
yeah, no, I know about that. I worked on that one too.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you. Oh, you're done at the end of this year. That's our year.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll connect somewhere.
It's like 72.
It's
like 60.
I'm back on Thursday, but it's a full day at the wastewater.
All right. Yeah, now it's, yeah.
So,
Well, now they are coming, but I'm gonna grab a lot.
okay,
Is it 85?
I'm gonna make some amendments.
Okay,
I'm
good.
gonna make some amendments to the agenda here. So, I've had a moment to touch base with the chair here. We're gonna make a couple amendments to the agenda. Unless the commission doesn't see fit. But we'll move the item E, declaration of surplus property, to the following, meeting, and we'll, move item G, the determination for process for review of general manager, to the September meeting as well, so that the next item, annual review of the investment policy and broker list, will be the last, agenda item before the executive session for tonight. Is that amenable to members of the commission?
Yes,
Thank you, yes.
Wonderful, thank you, and thank you for being here already. Ready to go, Mr. Dunmeyer, to present our annual review of investment policy and broker list.
Thank you,
Thank
Madam
you.
Mayor, members of the commission. So yeah, each year we are required by our investment policy to have an annual review of the policy and re-adopt it even if there are no changes to the policy. Also, as part of the policy, we're to do an annual review of the performance of the investments over the past year, and also to review the brokers and firms that are on our approved broker firm list. So those were all included as part of my staff report. Interest rates have continued to rise over the year, and our investment performance has done well. We had just over $3.7 million of investment income. Our investments are spread across the local government investment pool, the Oregon Short-Term Fund, as well as the Intermediate Fund. And US Treasuries, we have had a couple of treasuries as of June 30th. And so all of that kind of combined generated the income for us. And the second page of my staff report shows the review that I did of our brokers and firms. This is similar to what we had in the prior year. The brokers, their firms, all, like I said, similar, clean opinions on the financials. Brokers all meet the requirements of the policy. I did note in my review, so and we talked about this last year, two of our firms have a large number of regulatory events. All of them, of course, operate in a highly regulated environment. The larger firms that we have a number of offices across the country, some internationally as well. And I did note when I did my review, Stifel Financial Corporation, they actually had 5 additional this year of those regulatory actions. I reviewed those. They were similar in nature to some of their other ones that they've had, which are centered around management related kind of issues, training, and procedural things, supervisory systems. So things occur that shouldn't in terms of trades because of those systems or lack of training and that kind of thing. And I think that's because they've got so many agencies and thousands of employees. So those in and of themselves weren't disqualifying. As I was preparing my staff, kind of what I wanted to communicate today as part of the staff report, I did recognize our policy requires those firms to notify us if they have had regulatory action. And they're supposed to do that within 30 days. And so I contacted our broker from Stifel, Anthony Nelson, and I talked to him about that. And he said the firm doesn't actually inform him either if that happens. And the mechanism for that is actually the FINRA report, which we get. That's part of what the brokers have to report to us annually, is they give us the FINRA report for them and their firm. But the 30-day notification didn't happen. And so as we were talking, we determined that the way to address that would be for him to provide me those FINRA reports every month. And so he actually created a Outlook invitation for me to remind him and me to look at that every month. And so I'm going to do that with him and with the other two brokers, even though they didn't have any. But I think that's just a good mechanism to make sure that we look at that, and it'll be easy just to track, because if they've got an additional one, I'll see that and can review it with them. So, and I would say the backdrop of all this is that the firms don't hold any of our money. They never touch it. They don't hold our investments. They don't hold our money. That's all through our safekeeping bank. So when we place they'll present options. If we go to them and say, we want to look at treasury purchase, they'll give us options and we'll select one. And when they'll send us back the trade ticket, it's executed in their system, but it's not actually transacted. The transaction occurs from the safekeeping bank delivering the funds to the brokerage firm after the brokerage firm delivers to them the trade ticket. I review the trade ticket, the safekeeping bank reviews the ticket, makes sure that it's the same thing. And basically we're buying what we told the safekeeping bank that we wanted. They verify that, they release the funds and receive the securities. So it's all handled really in terms of finances and the investments themselves. It's all handled outside of those brokerage firms. It's done with our safekeeping bank, and the safekeeping bank holds that in not in an omnibus account, but in a trust account in our name. So we are, in my view, we are very secure, and this is a procedural thing that I've addressed, and we'll do that going forward.
Mark, who's our safety?
Zion's, yeah.
Thank you. Any questions at this time?
No, I appreciate.
No questions here.
I have a question from Peter Tate.
I just clarification. All of our investment funds are going into the capital project funds for water or light. I mean, water or electricity. We're the interest that we're earning. Sorry.
So we haven't had a separate fund before, so the minimum that we're gonna start here then that would be a question. Do the money that is earned from the minimum cash, does that go to the minimum cash or does that go to the capital?
Okay.
So that's gonna be a question as we move forward.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for all the good work.
Thank you. So we'll be looking for a motion to adopt this policy.
This is resolution number 2024-19, a resolution adopting an investment policy for surplus funds in the city of McMinnville Municipal Corporation, State of Oregon, acting by and through its Water and Light Commission.
I'll move.
Moved.
I have a motion from Commissioner Christensen, a second from Commissioner Gormley, and I'll ask the clerk to poll the commission.
Yes, Mayor Dropkin,
Aye.
Commissioner Tate,
Aye.
Commissioner Tankersley,
Aye.
Commissioner Gormley,
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted unanimously. Thank you. We will now go to general manager comments.
The only comment I would have is Commissioners Tate and Tankersley and I and the clerk will be going to John D. Dam tomorrow.
Excellent.
Exciting.
Any commissioner comments?
I have one comment. I had in some notes when we were in preparation for doing the financial, the
Reserves.
cash reserve policy, is
Yeah.
that right? This was like from a couple years ago, but it's been brought up since, is that we were going to, look at an STC study as part of looking at revenues and financial reserves. And I don't know where that stands, but I'd like to see that come back up as a topic of discussion, because I think we did have a study, but
Yes.
then we tabled it and,
So we can
but
bring
it's,
that back.
yeah, it'd be nice to just revisit that, I think, if that's okay.
Mhm.
Thank you. Any additional commissioner comments? Have commissioners had an opportunity to review the financials?
Yes.
And are there questions?
No questions?
All right, in that case, we are going to go into executive session. We will not come back into open session. So I will close the public meeting. Thank you all for being here this evening. And if you will read us into executive session,
Right,
please.
we're going pursuant to RS 19260 sub 2 sub F to consider information records that are exempt from public disclosure under RS 192-345-23, revealing the security measures to protect individuals, buildings, property, and information processing. And RS 192-355-47 relating to cybersecurity insurance records and coverage, and RS 192-660 sub 2 sub P to consider matters relating to cybersecurity infrastructure and responses to cybersecurity threats. I don't think we have any media, as Mayor's already indicated, we're gonna be closing without coming back into open session.